of our regular panelists. The third person has an emergency, so we'll have to excuse her today. Anyways, it's a pleasure to have a business and financial consultant. He's also chairman, board of trustees of ACT Network, a good governance advocacy group, in the person of Mr. Segun Shokbiton with us today. Good afternoon, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming. Also, we have one of our regulars. He's an amazing man. Always here when you call him. I'd like to say we appreciate you for that. He's a renowned journalist and he runs an online news platform. It's a pleasure to have Akogun Ganikayo de Balogun join us today. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you again. All right, the number to use is 0802-836-8971, and that's for viewers who would like to contribute to the show. The number is for text messages only. All right, straight to our first topic of the day. The United States blames killings in Nigeria on reign of impunity. The United States of Nigeria has blamed the killings in the Middle Belt and Northern Nigeria on what it identified as the reign of impunity. The American government also said the killings increased because the perpetrators were not punished. The Nigerian government should strengthen its laws to deal with killers, it advised. The U.S. urged the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure the conduct of a free, fair, transparent, peaceful, and credible process of the 2019 general elections by the Independent National Electoral Commission. All right, when I was preparing this topic, my assistant in the office asked me, what is impunity? So it struck me that perhaps a lot of Nigerians might actually just use that word but not actually know what it means. All right, we have a footage explaining to us all exactly what impunity is, and this is courtesy of Stop Impunity Nigeria. Let's take that. We'll be back to the table.
Ranked as the second biggest economy in Africa and 31st in the world, endowed with tremendous natural and human resources, it's a wonder Nigeria has not surpassed or even matched global expectations in terms of human development. Often seen as one of the most undisciplined and most corrupt nations on earth, with a bad reputation globally, it is disturbing Nigerians are not more concerned about their situation and the actions that need to be taken to move forward. Whilst every country has its problems, the fuel or driving force behind most of ours is known as impunity. In simple language, impunity is disregard for law and order in society. Open and shameless display of lawlessness with the arrogance of not being challenged because there is no accountability.
Impunity is traceable to the lack of confidence in the rule of law by the ruling class.
Is freedom from risk of punishment. It's accepting a person who's a wrongdoer from punishment, as well as the due discipline.
It's an escape from punishment. It's a sort of deviant behavior that propels someone to escape from punishment.
Social commentators observe that any attempt to develop the nation without first tackling impunity will only amount to window dressing and resolve nothing. Impunity is a cancer that has eaten deep into the psyche of Nigerians in all walks of life, and the effect is visible in 4 critical sectors of the society.
Impunity multiplies itself like a virus, and before you know it can destroy the society. So the effect of non-enforcement of laws is that impunity becomes widespread. And I think Nigeria typifies that example.
Impunity is something that is of great concern and is inimical to peaceful coexistence, enforcement of law and order, and achievement of sound and varied justice in our society.
As can be seen, impunity occurs everywhere in our society, and our inability to deal with it engenders a society of anything goes.
In a state that impunity reigns, nobody is going to be accountable.
I think government has a responsibility to up its activities
so that the level of impunity in the society will be reduced. Because the level of impunity as we have it today is not beneficial to citizens, it's not beneficial to the government, it's not beneficial to the country. And all hands must be on deck to ensure that impunity is reduced.
Impunity has kept us from reaching our potentials, and as our values erode, the issue is no longer a matter of discussion, but one that requires immediate and urgent action. We all must act now.
Welcome back. All right, 0802-836-8971 is the number to use. All right, gentlemen, once again, we're discussing impunity. We all know there's impunity in Nigeria, and the dimensions of it, are just getting bigger and bigger by the day. But for the United States of America to point at it again and also bring to the fore the fact that it is responsible for all of the security challenges, that we have in Nigeria today. Now, I know Nigeria is a nation that has laws. Why is it difficult, to make people face consequences, for acts of impunity in Nigeria? Let's start with you, Mr. Shokutan.
Okay, thanks again for having me, and Baraka de Sala to the viewers at home. It's ironic, that America says this, because I kind of disagree to a certain degree.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes, impunity has a role to play in the continuance of whatever behavioral pattern that is undesirable for a society, but it's not the all in all.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, for instance, why I say that. The United States of America that is talking to us, that has arrogated to itself the role of the world police, and lecturer par excellence in all fields, to everybody, continuously till today suffers heinous, despicable, unthinkable killings in America, on American soil, on a regular and frequent basis, in schools, in public places. People just walk in, somebody walks into a cinema and just pulls the trigger and starts killing. Now, the reason I say I disagree, think about this, madam. Every single one of those instances, the perpetrators are apprehended. Almost, usually, almost immediately because of the, awesomeness of their security system and all that. They usually apprehend these guys within a few days, a few weeks, at most a few months, and yet it continues. So the question is, in America, impunity is not as big a problem as it is in Nigeria, and yet the killings have persisted. So I think it's a bit simplistic, for the United States to come out and say, the reason for the killings and the persistence of killings in Nigeria is a result of impunity. Yes, we have impunity in the country across board. Like we always say, just take it down to simple issues of traffic lights, jumping traffic lights. It's a passion for me. It's very, very painful, when you see that happening. But obviously, one of the reasons that happens is that you don't get apprehended and you don't get punished. So to that extent, yes.
Okay. All right, Akogun, do you share the same opinion or you disagree?
Well, the essence of impunity is societal.
Okay.
And it's basically based on loss of basic values. When there is no punishment, then there is no deterrent. Of course, impunity is not the same thing as judgment. They are two different things. A society can decide to obey laws. Doesn't mean there will not be deviance. But it means that the majority of the people will obey the simple laws. For example, we all know in certain countries, you cannot evade tax. In certain countries, you cannot buy certain properties without telling people where you got your money from. That's the beginning of impunity in the Nigerian system. Most people seem to forget that there was a time that soldiers would be queried for riding cars above their grade. And they have to show proof that they got car loans to build houses and all that. It may be or may not be true, but there's a semblance of order.
Exactly.
In that essence, that even though I've stolen the money, I must find a way
to cover it up.
To cover it up in such a way that to fit. But nowadays nobody cares. A man who earns 150,000 naira a month lives in a house of 40 million, drives a 12 million naira car, and then you know exactly that he knows that nothing will happen. That to me is the beginning of impunity. The other aspect of it, of course, is the fact that we know that in Nigeria justice moves extremely slowly. And you know that if you have the money at the time, you can conveniently escape punishment by getting the best lawyers, and getting the best system, and drag it for as long as you can. Just yesterday, people were indicted in the US for certain things that was unthinkable in Nigeria. These are very close to the president of the country. There is no impunity in that essence. It doesn't mean they will not have challenges.
They will. But nobody is above the law.
You know they are not. And so that's the difference. About US poking its notes, it's other people's business. They've been doing that for 100 years. It's not really what they have said is what we have said.
You don't see that ending. I mean, they will do that. Maybe not to North Korea, but every other country will definitely, But, my question still remains. We have all the laws, know. Why is it difficult to apply the law, to erring Nigerians?
That's the example I just gave you. That there was a time in this country, people will hide their wealth. People will consciously go out of their way. Because impunity became a state policy. When it's obvious that you cannot be punished. When the man, Mr. A, was not punished, Mr. B was not punished, automatically Mr. C will do the same thing. Nobody has been made an example of certain aspects. I told people, in some countries, 4 a.m. in the morning, you are the only one in traffic. And you stop for the traffic lights. No policeman around, no other person around. 10 p.m. in Nigeria, you dare not try it. Because somebody somewhere will think you are a fool and just whips past you. So impunity is beyond going to the level of governance. Even at our own homes, we have children that are immune to punishment. And I would say they are too young or they are too brilliant. You just want an excuse not to punish them. And if you don't do that, they grow up with that entitlement mentality. That what they are doing is right. And they are above the law.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you asked the question, what's responsible? What's changed when he was analyzing and he was saying, in the past, and it's not too distant a past, as recently as 30, 40 years ago, things were very different in terms of our moral fiber and our values as a country. But I think we've kind of put ourselves in a catch-22, which comes first, chicken or the egg situation, where impunity breeds impunity, and the society that should cry out against impunity sometimes justifies it, sometimes takes advantage of it to their own interest and their own benefits. So how did we get here? I think that it's a gradual descent down the very spiral slope that it will take monumental effort on the part of a visionary leader to check and to stop.
Because we see it more, within the ruling class, so to say, the political class in Nigeria. Now, the U.S. has also advised us to strengthen our laws. Is that an indication that our laws are perhaps weak? We do know that there are loopholes here and there, but do we really need to do a bit more in terms of enactment of laws?
It was Alhaji Jaiye Akonde who said in 1980 that make a law on Monday morning. The Nigeria will look for a loophole just as the afternoon commences. And this is very simple. We have adequate laws. But some of our laws are so draconian that it should stop people even from thinking of breaking those laws. But there is no correlation between law and reality. Because somebody you sent to jail for stealing a purse, the same law that sent him to jail for 7 years is the same law that allows a man who stole 100 million naira to pay 2 million and get a bail of 25,000. So the lacuna, when you just oppose punishment in relation to the crime, is part of the system that they are talking about. But it's not the only one. even the small ones that we have cannot be enforced. Because those who are supposed to enforce it are themselves perpetrators of the problem of impunity. So to us to get there, I don't want to call it the Rollins treatment, but I keep telling people, making Nigeria sit up is the easiest thing to do. Just take charge of what the laws have said, and you are free. The law says you pay XYZ for tenements. The tenement is a reflection of how much money your house is worth over a period of time. That's the start. If you have a house that you said is worth 700 million, and your entire income in your working life is 7 million, something is missing. But they can't do that because majority of those who have penetrated this part are actually civil servants who are sure that things will not work. So for us to fight, call it whatever you want, impunity, bigmanism, using tribalism, using religion, try to justify the unjustifiable, does not change the fact that we are a weak country when it comes to enforcing laws.
All right, you just raised a very valid point, the fact that, the same scenario, but where you have a rich person or a poor person, then the law applies differently. Double standards.
Absolutely, and it's a fundamental problem within the Nigerian justice system. So people would always say, if you talk to lawyers, they will tell you there is a law for the rich and there's a law for the poor. It's the same law. The way the police, starting from the law enforcement agencies, the way the police will treat the Okada rider, right? In the same incident where the Okada rider is actually the victim, and the guy that is driving a G-Wagon that hit the Okada rider and injured him will be radically different right from that point. And if the Okada rider is fortunate enough to have the case pushed to the courts, you still find that there is still some sort of benefit, preferential treatment that the man of means would get. And you cannot have a society built on that kind of injustice. So it's all, that's why I say it's a catch-22 situation. It's a conundrum. Where do you start from? The justice system encourages impunity. Like he said, it's so easy to drag even a criminal case in spite of the ACJ that has been recently enacted. It's so easy to drag criminal cases for as long as you want, much less a civil case. Somebody owes you money and you think you want to take him to court, or you have a tenant who is recalcitrant. You'll be there for a while. So enforcing your fundamental rights can be, pretty challenging.
So the judicial system also has a share.
Everybody.
Yeah, but they always have like a valid reason why cases drag, especially where it entails life and all of that, is to get all of the facts, so that you don't sentence an innocent man. But then there is also the other side of it where a lot of the evidences and everything are eroded over time, and at the end of the day, justice might just not be served. Okay, let's see how our viewers are reacting at this time. Emmanuel Joel from Jos says it's really high time the international community, including the International Court of Justice, start to condemn killings in Nigeria. This other one says, one thing that is certain is that any crisis that exceeds 24 hours, then there should be a government hand on it. All right, this other one says, a law for the rich and different laws for the poor, and loss of moral values over the years breeds impunity. Adegoroye from Ibadan sent that one in. All right, so the way forward, let's proffer solutions. How do we begin to deal with impunity? Because even people who are guilty of this act, a lot of times, like you pointed out, Akpogbo, they don't see it really like a crime. It's more like an entitlement. Is what I should get, Where do we start to deal with this issue?
We have to go back to the basics. And all of us are responsible. I was once with a politician, and I saw the amount of money he spent on a normal day. And this amount is beyond and above what you can legitimately get. And he told me this is the only way for him to remain in office. So it's a conundrum between what we want. Remember that old joke about what we want, change. Who wants to change? Nobody. Everybody wants change.
But nobody wants to change.
So the problem remains, because that's a societal thing. Unless we start pulling sources of income and sudden elevation to wealth, we will continue to go around in circles. And it's not only because lawyers are poor or judges are corrupt. It's just that once you move to a particular circle, it's expected that you're entitled to protection by your people of your peer. It's not popular, even in journalism, as you know. There are things that we do that when it concerns the journalists, that you wonder what happened to the rule of law. Meanwhile, we are the same people that will shout hell and hellfire if it happens to another animal or a soldier.
Very true.
Impunity cuts across the gamut of our society. So we have to go back to basics. Start querying source of income of people that you know. A man cannot come to Lagos with a nylon bag 6 months ago and be living at Kejajari 6 months later without winning lottery. There's something is missing.
But let me ask, who queries? I know there's a civic angle to all this,
Absolutely.
where every citizen has a responsibility. But then, who queries really? Who queries on this issue of impunity?
It's a pardon me, it's a twofold solution. So there's this argument that's a continuous argument about is it the role of the leader or the role of the follower to initiate change, especially when you're talking about a society like Nigeria. And I've always said that both parties have a role to play. So on the part of the citizens, if I may ask, how many of us watching this program now have ever, since the Freedom of Information Act was enacted, now a couple of years ago, have ever initiated a Freedom of Information request from any government agency? How many? How many people, you know, in Nigeria today has sat up to do a letter to the Consumer Protection Council to complain about a bill they've gotten from any of the telecoms providers or, you know, the terrestrial, whatever, any service provider?
Or
how
even
many?
pay TV.
Pay TV, you know, HMOs, you know, there's so much abuse, impunity all over the place, but citizens sit back and take it. Now, I think that to a larger extent, the fundamental responsibility of cutting this cycle lies with government and the leader. And that's why I say, for things to change fundamentally in a society like ours, you need a visionary, determined, resolute leader who says no more and then leads the charge. That has been a missing ingredient in our history, in our political history. Somebody who stands up and says, you know what, this is where we're going as a country, and this is how we're going to do it. Until we get that, you know, we keep running around in circles because nobody is taking responsibility. Nature tends towards disorder. So anything that you don't intervene in will always go towards what's worse. It's never going to get better by itself. So we need a leader to stand up and say, you know, this is not good enough. This is how we should go.
Okay, all right. We have one of our regulars also who is commenting on this issue, Mrs. Nelly Agu. She says impunity is exemption from punishment or freedom from the injurious consequences of an action. USA are not free from this, but they still bring to book the high and mighty with a good justice system. In Nigeria, the more money you have, the lesser the justice system treats you. Fighting of corruption in Nigeria is not working because of weakness in our justice system. Many walk free despite heinous crimes against them. Impunity is killing us in Nigeria. A security official driving against traffic, but an ordinary Nigerian will be caught is really a canker worm. I mean, like you rightly said, traffic, typically on a work day, I mean, go to a traffic-prone area and you see the police. I understand, maybe sometimes there's an emergency and all that, but sometimes there is nothing.
There is no emergency.
And they just recklessly break
most
all
times
the
there is no
traffic laws.
emergency.
They take the one way and nothing happens, you know, and then a citizen follows you and that becomes the bad person.
You get apprehended.
So we're all to blame. But then impunity is really not helping anybody, like the report says there. But let's move it along because of time to our next topic. Explosion of political parties in Nigeria. Following the newly registered 23 political parties by INEC, Nigeria